Hi, I'm Ben Bice from Woodcraft and welcome to our wood shop. Today we're going to discuss and show you how to turn an acrylic pen. Specifically today we are going to turn a Wall Street 2 standard gold plating, and we're going to use one of our new acrylic pen blanks just recently released that is called Inferno. It is a bright red and yellow swirl pattern. Once finished, as you can see, has a lot of high contrast. It's a very beautiful pen blank once done. Some items that we will discuss today of things that were needed if you're getting into this brand new. One of the items that you will need are turning tools. And we have a couple examples of some styles of turning tools that are available to you. Along the lines of a traditional turning tool, this is a 3/4 inch gouge used for roughing. This goes back to more of the traditional style of turning. One of the newer styles just recently released is from a company called Easy Wood Tools. This is what they call their CI0 Easy Finisher. It is a round carbide replaceable inserted tool. Never needs sharpened. As the tool begins to dull, you can simply loosen the set screw, rotate the cutter. Brand new cutting edge, you're sharp and ready to go. Once the cutter is totally dulled and used, you simply unscrew it, replace it, and put a new one back on, and you're ready to roll. This tool features a very nice ergonomic handle. Feels great in the hand. Very easy to use, but you'll be able to see how well this tool performs later in the video once we get to turning with it. CA glues, you have epoxies, some pen blanks you can even use polyurethane glues, but by far the best ones that we've found that have worked really well is either a thick CA or a 5-minute epoxy to adhere your tubes to your blanks. Another item that you will need is a drill bit. Almost every pen kit has a specific sized bit that is required to glue your brass tube into your blank. Pay attention to that in your instructions. It will tell you what size that you need. Other items, a pen blank. Woodcraft offers hundreds of different blanks. Acrylic line alone, there are over probably 120 blanks to choose from in different colors, patterns, and designs. We also carry metal blanks, M3s, we carry laminated wood blanks, we carry true stone blanks. There's just a wide variety of options to choose from, so be sure to check those out. For finishing your pen blanks, obviously you'll need to sand. To get a great high gloss finish, we recommend the Micro Mesh wet sanding discs. These start out at 1500 grit and go all the way up to 12,000 grit. Once you work through those grits, you will achieve a very high gloss finish on your kits. To add a little bit more luster to your kit, Hut makes an ultra gloss plastic polish. Once you've completed your micro meshing, a little dab of this on a rag, spin it, and buff your blank right out, and it'll help take out any of those fine little micro swirls that may be left from when you've done your turning and finishing. One of the most important items that you'll need for turning pen kits is a vise to secure your pen blanks. The Wood River Deluxe self-centering pen vise is just the ticket for what you need. This item allows you to secure anything from a pen blank all the way up to a bottle stopper 1.5 inches squared. So this is very versatile, very secure in clamping, very easy to use. Simply set it, clamp it, and you're ready to go. Once this has been affixed to your drill press, there is never a need to move it again unless you change the size of your blank. It will always center the blank exactly where you need it to be. Here at Woodcraft, we offer hundreds of pen styles and pen kits to choose from. Obviously, we said this is going to be the Wall Street 2 standard gold plating that we're going to turn today. But in addition to that, we also have some other platings that are available in multiple kits. One of the platings that we have is a black titanium and titanium gold. This is also for a Wall Street 2, which is called our Elegant series. There are several parts and components to these pens. First one that we looked at, this is the nib. You have the cap. Then we have our ink refill. You have your transmission, which raises and lowers the ink refill inside of your pen. Last but not least is the brass tube. We will drill the blank and eventually glue this into place, and this will aid us in turning our pen. Another great tool for your shop is the Wood River pen tube insertion tool. This allows you to take your brass tube, insert it into your pen blank once it's drilled and glued, and it keeps your hands clean. No more gluing your hands together and having that embarrassing story to tell your friends. All right, let's get started on turning our pen. One of the first things that I do, and this is totally up to you, everybody will develop their own style as they continue to go through and learn this process. You'll develop your own turning styles, you'll develop your own sanding styles and things to that effect. But this is personally how I like to do it. And one of the first things I do is I lay my brass tube down on the blank, and I take a fine Sharpie marker and I just make a slight mark about an 1/8 inch longer than the brass tube. And that way that I know that I'll have plenty of blank left over for any reason. If I have a little bit of blowout in the drilling process, I can square that end up and still be good to go, and I won't lose my blank. So let's head over to the bandsaw and let's cut our blank. All right, we're here at our jet bandsaw, and we're going to get ready and go ahead and cut our blank down to size and then prepare to drill. Before we head over to the drill press, we've got another important step to do, and that's marking our centers for the blank so that we know where to line up our bit with when we're setting up our drilling vise. I simply just take a square, line it up on my corners, make a little mark, and I create a little X, and that tells me where my center is on my blank so that I ensure that I get a good straight hole through my blank when I'm getting ready to glue. All right, let's get ready to drill our blank. We're here at our Powermatic drill press. I already have our self-centering pin vise locked down and clamped to the base and ready to go. So let's drill. Periodically, you'll want to bring that back up and take the shavings out. And here's what I want you to see. Look at how nice and clean that exit hole was on that blank. You want to know why? That's because we're using the Colt Pinmakers bits. These bits, as you can see, do a great clean hole every time, and I have very little, if ever, any chip out at the bottom. Great investment. Saves a lot of time, saves a lot of blanks. Okay, now let's glue our brass tube into our pin blank. One thing that I recommend, and most people do recommend out there, is that you take your brass tube, fine grit sandpaper, I'm using 320 today, and just lightly scuff the brass tube. And what that helps do is aid in the adhesion of whatever product that you're using to glue it in, whether it be CA, whether it be an epoxy. This just helps you give a little bit better grip on the blank. So let's go ahead and let's rough this blank up a little bit. Now, as you can see, I didn't do a lot, but you can see where it's roughed up, and just that little bit will give it that better grip when you go to glue it into the blank. So let's get to gluing it up. All right, today I've chosen Barrel Bond's 5-minute 2-part epoxy. This is a new product that was just recently released. The great feature to this is you're getting the hold, the flexibility of a standard 5-minute epoxy with a little bit longer work time, which means I can glue up multiple tubes with one pre-mix. So let's go ahead and get some mixed up. Very easy to do. It's labeled. Part A is blue, part B is red. Simply take equal amounts of A and B. And we're going to take our paddle and we're just going to work those together until you see a consistency in the collar. Now what I've done is I've taken another one of my paddles and I've whittled it down to make a little spatula. And what I'll do is get some of the epoxy on there. And then I just coat the interior of the tube really well. And I make sure that it's good and coated so that I make sure that I get proper adhesion with the brass to the acrylic blank. One of the reasons why I like using the 5-minute epoxy, the Barrel Bond specifically, is the work time. I've got an opened work time Compared to a CA, I have very limited time to get the CA applied and inserted before it can set up, and I can ruin blanks that way. This allows me greater workability, and I have the ability to not have to worry about my pen tube getting stuck prematurely when I go to set that in. Fingers are clean, pen tube insertion tool is clean, and I've got my tube set and ready to go. So we'll let it cure and then we'll get to turning. Okay, now we're going to square the end of our blank. There's two methods that I want to cover. Once again, you'll develop your own style and your own methods of squaring the ends of your blanks. But what we're going to use on one end is a pin mill. It has a pilot shaft that centers it up inside of the tube, and then it has a 3/4 inch cutter head that squares the blank. Let's try it out. Now, bear in mind, when you're squaring that, you only want to go to where you just barely kiss the brass. You don't want to go into the brass and cut that down because the length of your tube is very critical. So do not drill down into your brass. But as you can see, we've got a nice, smooth, flush area to start our turning from. Let's head over to the sander and I'll show you the other method for squaring the end of your blanks. One thing that I like to do before I square the end of my blanks is I want to make sure that my sanding disc is clean and ready to go. Woodcraft carries a belt disc cleaner. Very easy to use. Simply turn your sander on, rub the disc, and it gives me a nice clean surface to work from now. Another important thing to remember that when you're getting ready to square your blank is always ensure that your fence is square to the disc. And I'm going to be using a miter gauge, so I need to ensure that my miter gauge is 90 degrees to my disc. It's a very simple process. Take a good accurate square, lay it on your fence, and ensure that you see no light, that it is a true 90 degrees to the fence. We're going to install our miter gauge, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to lay that on the back of our fence against the disc, and we're going to ensure that we're square, which we are. So we're ready to go ahead and square our blank. Not all blanks are going to give you the ability to square using this type of procedure. Most acrylic blanks have a good, true, flat 90-degree surface that you can use to square your blanks. That's what we're going to do right now. The important thing to remember, once again, is not to sand into your brass. And you'll be able to hear the difference when you're sanding it. It'll have a different ring and a different tone. So it's going to take a few times to learn that procedure, but bear in mind you do not want to sand your tube and shorten your length. Let's go ahead and square the blank. Did you hear that? Right there was that sound. Nice, squared in, right to the brass. And we're ready to start turning. All right, we're here at our Delta lathe, and let's get ready to set our blank up. With every pen kit, there are also specific bushings that are going to be required. The Wall Street 2, however, is a very simple setup. It only requires 2 bushings. Both of those bushings are identical, so placement is not critical. It's very easy to do. Take the lip of the bushing, insert it in your blank. Same thing on the other end. We're going to place that on our mandrel, spacer, and then we're going to take our brass nut and we're going to tighten that blank down. We'll bring our tailstock down with our 60-degree cone attached and advance it until it engages and lock it down, and we're ready to turn. All right, let's get started turning. As discussed earlier, I said that we were going to cover 2 different ways of turning. There's your traditional style, and then we'll get to the carbide replaceable inserts here in just a moment. Let's go ahead and let's get started. Once again, this is a 3/4 inch gouge, roughing gouge. Let's see how this works. We're going to be spinning our blank roughly at about 1,300 RPMs. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bring that bevel up, rotate the handle upwards until we start seeing it engage, and then we're going to ride that bevel We're starting to get there. It's getting somewhat round. Now, let's switch over and let's show you the Easy Wood tools. I want to show you what this is capable of doing as well. We're at the lathe with the Easy Wood tools, and one thing crucial to remember on these is placement is somewhat important, and the best way that I can tell you on aligning these up is to take your rest, set your tool, and you're going to want that cutter head to come halfway on your blank. So let's get this set up and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Top of the tool on your rest, and that cutter head should be about halfway or center of your blank. One of the great features with these tools, I don't have to worry about a primary bevel. I don't have to worry about proper angles. The main things that I have to remember is that I'm flat on my rest, handle is parallel, and then I can simply advance it and I can come left and I can come right. We're going to take the speed up just a little bit on these. Sometimes the acrylics do a little bit better at a higher speed, and that's just something that you'll have to experiment with. And there's the ribbons. The other great thing I want you to see is look at how smooth of a finish that you get with this tool. This is straight tool finish. This hasn't been sanded. Nothing's been done to that blank, and that's just simply using this carbide tool. This is where the creative aspect can come in for you, the turner, is that you can turn any profile, any design that you want. You can make your pen as fat as you want, as slim as you want. You can come in and turn decorative edges. What I'm doing right now, though, is I'm just trying to get my initial set down to my bushings, and that's where you're going to want to take it to. That's what these bushings are for. They're a guide to tell you how narrow or how thick to leave your blank. So I just kind of get mine close to that, and then that gives me an idea of where I need to be, and then I can do my finished profiling here in a bit. All right, the shape feels good. Now we're getting ready to do the finishing process. Once again, this is totally up to you how you finish your blanks. But what I like to do is I come in with Abernet. This is 120. And I just lightly bring everything in. And then I just work up through my grits. So that was 120. This is 220. And it doesn't take much. And then I periodically check it to see how it feels. Now we've got 320. Now I do want to stress the importance of personal protection. And as you can see, I've got my goggles on. Typically I would be wearing a full face respirator, but obviously for recording purposes I can't have one on and talk to you and tell you what we're doing. But typically I would have a dust mask on, and we do truly recommend for your protection that you do the same and you wear a respirator. All right, we're back at the lathe, and I always like to lay a rag down to protect the bed of my lathe when I do my wet sanding, and then I have my micro mesh discs. And once again, these start out at 1500 and progressively go all the way to 12,000 grit. So let's get started, and you'll be able to see the progression as these go through, how great of a shine and polish it puts on these blanks. Dunk it in the water and bring it to your blank, and it's just very light passes, quick passes. Don't have to spend a lot of time. The important thing is to keep the water going. The water is what keeps things cool. And I like to take, well, maybe 2 or 3 passes depending on the grit, and then just work up to the next one. Same procedure for each one, just light, quick little passes. All right, we're just about there. This is the last one. This is the 12,000 grit. I'll make a couple passes over that, and then I'll let you see what the result is. Dry it off. And look at that. One final step that I like to do, just as a little added measure for polishing, is we have the Hut Ultra Glass Plastic Polish. And I like to take just a little dab. Doesn't take much at all. And then I just hand spin it real quick and get the polish on there, and then I turn my lathe on. And I just like to give it a little buff. And it helps get out any fine micro swirls or sanding marks or anything that may be remaining. And then just come back with a clean portion of your towel. Wipe it off a couple times and make sure you get all that off. And it just helps add a little bit more luster and shine to the blank. So let's get ready to go press our pen kit together, and we'll show you the finished results. All right, we're back at the workbench, and we're getting ready to assemble our pen. One of the great things about the Wall Street is also the ease of assembly on this pen kit. So before you even get started turning, you could actually assemble 85% of this pen. Simply take your nib, install your ink refill, take your transmission, screw it down, and there's 85% of your pen already done. To finish the process, you have a pre-assembled cap with clip. All you need to do is simply choose which end you want the cap to go into. So what I like to do is I like to rotate it around, and I look at the collar and I look at the designs, and then I try to figure out where I think the best placement would be for the clip. And I try to leave as much figure and things as possible, and I really like that big pattern of swirl with the yellow. So what I'd like to try to do is I'm going to install my clip right in between those so that when I look at that pen I see all that swirl. So I've set my pen press, and it's a very easy procedure. Hold your pen and advance and press it until it seats. Next, take the assembled portion of the pen that you've already done, slide it over, press until it locks down, and we've got a finished, completed pen. One great feature also about the Wall Street 2 pen kit, as you can see, I have the remaining portion of the blank that we used. And if you look, I have enough that I can turn 2 pens out of 1 blank. It's another great feature and benefit with this pen kit. One thing that I'd like to point out, and I did this on purpose to show a common issue that we have happen with acrylic pen blanks. It's a characteristic called ghosting, and if you look at the 2 blanks side by side, you can see that the one on my right is much darker in appearance in the collar as the one on the left. You can also see an area where the brass tube shines through, and that's where we get the term ghosting. The brass is actually shining through the blank. And to prevent that, we have a few items that combat that. This in particular, on this one, I used a black titanium tube. So we have the dark tube underneath the acrylic, which keeps that color dark and deep and rich. So that's an added benefit or an added feature that you can use. And there's 3 different colors. There's a painted white, there's a nickel, and then once again there's the black titanium tubes. Great add-on feature. Keep that in mind when you're turning acrylic. That'll help you and not have the issue of ghosting appearing through your acrylic blanks. This completes our pen turning process and assembly. I want to thank you for tuning in, and be sure to check us out online or at your local Woodcraft store for our selection of the numerous pen kits and platings that we carry in stock. Thank you, and happy turning.